This Pride Month, let's look back at the major milestones of the LGBTQ+ community's progress. Welcome to the Pride Palace channel, and today we're highlighting our picks for the most important moments in the US history of the LGBTQ+ movement. Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe for more great content. For this list, we're looking at key events in the history of the LGBTQ movement in the US and focusing on the community as a whole rather than major accomplishments by singular people. But stay tuned for that list. Number 10, the Stonewall Riots. Occurring in 1969, the event is often cited as having kicked off the gay rights movement in America. The Stonewall Inn was a popular gay bar in New York City's Greenwich Village, and it was common for bars catering to the LGBTQ+ community to be targets for police raids. It all changed on June 28, 1969, when patrons decided to fight back. There were thousands of people involved out in the streets opposing to police. Nothing like that had ever happened before. Many of those present that night were people of color. The clash ended up lasting for days, with community organizers rallying to fight for safe spaces for these marginalized members of society. In the years that followed, the gay rights movement took enormous strides. Number 9, the first Pride parades. On the anniversary of the events that took place at the Stonewall Inn, celebrations were organized nationwide to commemorate that pivotal moment. Parades were held in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. These events weren't actually referred to as Pride parades in the 70s, but rather as gay liberation marches or gay freedom marches. The parades have since expanded to take place worldwide and have gained a more festive vibe over the years in a slight shift from the original spirit of activism and protest. Number 8, the transsexual phenomenon. Harry Benjamin was a doctor specializing in endocrinology and sexology, whose work has been linked to the progress of the trans movement. Benjamin was a colleague of the famed Alfred Kinsey, who introduced him to a child who was born male and wanted to transition to being female. Rather than discourage the process, Benjamin studied the medical possibilities for cases such as this. In 1966, he published his seminal work, The Transsexual Phenomenon, which outlined the procedure by which people could transition from one sex to the other. Prior to this, trans people were treated with electroconvulsive therapy or even lobotomy to rid them of their predilections. Number 7, the American Psychiatric Association removes homosexuality from the list of mental disorders. Published in 1968, the Second Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM-2, listed, among many other conditions, homosexuality. Sadly, this view was in line with the thinking and practices of the masses at the time. In 1973, however, the American Psychiatric Association called for a vote among its members on whether they thought homosexuality should be classified as a disorder or not. A significant majority voted to remove it, but ended up replacing it with a sexual orientation disturbance. It was arguably only in 1987 that it was completely removed from the DSM. The APA took leadership in this country in ensuring that the discrimination did not continue. Number 6, the first International Conference on Transgender Law and Employment Policy. Phyllis Randolph Fry, a prominent trans activist and as of a 2010 associate judge, has organized a series of critical conferences discussing transgender rights and the law over the years. The first one took place in Houston, Texas in 1992 and was attended by law professionals as well as trans community members. Many of the presentations and discussions were transcribed and went on to be printed for public use. These documents, referred to as the reference books, went on to serve as the building blocks for various studies on legal challenges of the trans community. Number 5, the Matthew Shepard Act. The full name of the act is the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which serves to commemorate 2 victims of hate crimes in the US. The act serves as an expansion on the United States federal hate crime law of 1969 by adding amendments for crimes based on perceived gender sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. President Barack Obama signed the law in 2009, which additionally requires the FBI to track crime statistics based on gender and gender identity, which they previously had not done because no one in America should be ever afraid to walk down the street holding the hands of the person they love. Number 4. Sexual orientation is added to the military's anti-discrimination policy. The wording of it is really misleading because it makes people think that under the policy you can be gay, lesbian, or bisexual and serve, but just not talk about it. In 1994, then President Bill Clinton instituted the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which stopped LGBTQ people from openly serving in the US military. This caused approximately 13,000 military service members to be removed from duty. In 2010, Barack Obama signed a repeal act into law, but it wasn't until 2015 that a positive change was made to the Army's anti-discrimination policy. Now, sexual orientation is listed under the Military Equal Opportunity Program as a protected class, meaning that members cannot be discriminated against because they are gay. Number 3. California bans insurance discrimination against transgender patients. In the early 2010s, the Department of Managed Healthcare, or DMHC, finally ensured that insurance companies complied with California's mid-2000s enactment of the Insurance Gender Non-Discrimination Act. This law was a landmark decision in terms of transgender healthcare rights. It deals with healthcare that people are not quite familiar with, but it does exist. Despite the act, however, some insurance companies still attempted to limit funds given for gender reassignment surgeries and other costs pertaining to a gender transition by officially banning exclusions for people who identify as transgender or gender non-conforming. Through this directive, the state guaranteed that trans people would have the same access to health insurance as everyone else living in the state. Number 2. President Obama acknowledges the LGBTQ+ community in the State of the Union address. Barack Obama positioned himself as a champion for all people, including those from the LGBTQ community. Under his leadership, many strides were made towards ultimate equality, but one of his most significant gestures was a subtle one. In his State of the Union address in 2015, the president said the words lesbian, bisexual, and transgender.
That's why we defend free speech and advocate for political prisoners and condemn the persecution of women or religious minorities or people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual.
This was the first time these words had ever been spoken during such an address. This may not be significant upon first thought, but when you think about how he acknowledges a community that's so used to being marginalized, just by saying those words, when its importance becomes much more clear. Number 1. The US Supreme Court rules same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states. The road to legalization of same-sex marriage in the United States was a long and challenging one. In 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to allow marriage between same-sex partners, and many states followed. In 2013, the Defense of Marriage Act, which legally defines marriage as between a man and a woman, was struck down by the Supreme Court. Nonetheless, there continue to be challenges, even in states that recognize these unions. As of June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that it's unconstitutional for individual states to forbid marriage between same-sex couples. Do you agree with our picks? Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Pride Palace channel.